Flying after 60 changes the moment you find out what the flight crew is actually allowed to give you for free. Right now, on every flight leaving an American airport today, there's a quiet list of things older travelers can ask for. Things the crew is genuinely happy to hand over. Things that decide whether a flight drains you or feels almost easy. Almost nobody talks about this list. Airlines don't advertise it. The crew won't bring it up first. And most seniors, over 60, spend years sitting in cramped seats, sipping half cups of soda, holding back from asking for things they're actually entitled to because nobody ever told them they could. Today I'm walking you through all 15. For the ones that feel awkward to ask for, I'll give you the exact words to use so it never feels uncomfortable. Not a single one of these costs you anything. Number 7 is the one most flight attendants quietly wish older passengers would ask for, because it costs them nothing and changes the entire flight. Number 4 is the small thing almost every older passenger walks right past without realizing it's about to be thrown away. And number 1 is the quiet move that keeps paying you back free on every trip you take after this one for years. Let's start at the very beginning before you even step on the plane. Number 15. The early boarding most seniors never claim. Watch the boarding line at any major airport gate. Business class boards, active military boards, families with small children board. And then there's a quiet group called passengers needing additional time, and almost no senior ever joins that line. Here's what airlines don't put on a sign. The definition of additional time is far looser than older travelers think. You don't need a wheelchair. You don't need to limp. You don't need to prove anything to anyone. If walking down a jet bridge with a carry-on takes you slightly longer than it used to, you qualify and the gate agent will wave you forward without a single question. Eleanor, a retired nurse from Tampa, spent 4 years watching priority groups board ahead of her on her flights to visit her grandchildren. One day, a friend told her to simply walk up to the gate desk and use one short sentence. She's boarded among the first passengers on every flight since. Full overhead bin space. Time to settle in. A calm start instead of a rushed one. She told me she couldn't believe she'd been doing it the hard way for that long. Your defense. Walk to the gate counter about 10 minutes before general boarding begins. Wait until priority groups have cleared. Speak softly, not loudly. Gate agents respond to calm more than urgency, and an unhurried tone almost guarantees a yes. The exact words. I'd appreciate a little extra time to board today, if that's all right. That gets you on the plane in comfort. But the next one decides whether you spend the whole flight in the seat you booked or a much better one. Number 14. The seat the gate agent quietly releases. There's a window of about 20 minutes before every flight where gate agents become unusually generous with seats, and almost no senior ever takes advantage of it. It's a small detail most travelers never notice. In those final minutes before boarding, the agent at the desk is actively rebalancing the cabin, keeping families together, opening exit rows for able-bodied flyers, reassigning seats that came back into the system from cancellations or no-shows. During that window, a polite senior asking for a better seat is almost always accommodated, even on flights that looked completely full an hour earlier. Frank, a retired postal worker from St. Louis, had booked a middle seat for a 5-hour flight to Phoenix because the aisle cost an extra $90. He waited until the gate area thinned out, walked up to the agent at the side counter, and asked softly if anything closer to the window had opened up. 4 minutes later, he had a new boarding pass in his hand. Not a single dollar charged. He still has that boarding pass in his kitchen drawer. Your defense. Arrive at the gate around 40 minutes before boarding. Don't ask at the main desk while it's busy. Wait for a quieter moment or use the side counter. Be specific about what you'd like, but never demand it. Tone is everything in that window. The exact words, if anything closer to an aisle has opened up, I'd be very grateful. That settles where you sit. But here's where most older travelers quietly lose out on something so small, they don't even realize it's possible. Number 13. The whole can instead of the half cup. You've watched this happen 100 times. The cart stops at your row. The flight attendant pours a small plastic cup of ginger ale, hands it over, and moves on. You sip it slowly. It's gone in 3 swallows. You stay thirsty for the next 2 hours. Here's the part nobody mentions out loud. Flight attendants are fully allowed to hand you the entire can. Airlines stock enough cans on every flight to serve full ones to anyone who asks. The half-cup pour isn't a rule, it's a speed habit. The crew moves through the cabin faster when they pour into cups, so that's the default. The moment a senior passenger politely asks for the can itself, it's handed over without hesitation almost every time. Beatrice, a retired school teacher from Knoxville, spent the better part of 2 decades sipping tiny cups of cranberry juice on long flights. One afternoon, on a layover to see her sister in Seattle, she asked the flight attendant for the whole can. The crew member smiled, handed it over, and said, "Of course, sweetheart." She's asked for the can every single flight since. Your defense: ask at the moment the cart first reaches your row, not 5 minutes after the crew has moved on. Be specific about the drink and the size in one short sentence. The exact words: "May I have the full can, please?" when you have a moment. That's the drink side of the cart, but the galley is quietly holding back something else, something most passengers never see roll past their row. Number 12. The snacks that never make it to the cart. The snack basket you see rolling down the aisle is rarely the full picture. Not even close. On most flights, the basket the crew walks past your row holds only a portion of what's actually stocked in the galley. The rest sits in a storage bin a few feet away: extra pretzels, cookies, granola bars, cheese crackers, sometimes Biscoff packets quietly available to passengers who think to ask for more. Crews almost never mention this. They aren't hiding it on purpose. They simply assume if you wanted more, you'd say so. Older travelers almost never do. There's a quiet politeness in that generation, taking what's offered, never asking for extra. The crew assumes the whole cabin is satisfied. They aren't. They just didn't ask. And here's the part that quietly bothers most flight attendants on long flights. The leftover snacks at the end of the trip get tossed into the trash during cabin cleaning. The food that could have helped someone gets thrown away instead. Your defense: wait until the first service round has completely passed your row. Catch the flight attendant during a quieter moment when they're walking back to the galley. Ask softly, not loudly. Warmth gets abundance. The exact words: "If there's anything extra in the galley to hold me over, I'd really appreciate it." That's what comes to you. The next one is about something that's already on the plane, sometimes 4 rows ahead, sitting completely empty for the entire flight. Number 11. The empty row, sitting 4 rows ahead. Look around the cabin once boarding finishes. On flights that aren't fully booked, there's almost always a full row of empty seats, somewhere often surprisingly close to where you're sitting. You see it, you wonder, you stay where you are. Here's what almost nobody realizes. Once the seatbelt sign turns off after takeoff, you're generally allowed to move to any empty row within your own cabin class. No announcement is ever made. The crew assumes anyone who wants to move will simply move. Passengers stay seated because they assume changing seats isn't allowed. So the row sits empty for the entire flight while a senior in the back struggles to get comfortable in a cramped middle seat. George, a retired engineer from Albuquerque, spent 4 hours on a flight to Boston, pressed against a stranger, while 3 empty seats stretched across the aisle in front of him. After landing, he mentioned it to the flight attendant and asked if he could have moved. She looked at him with quiet sympathy and said, "Any time after takeoff. Most people just don't ask." Your defense: wait until the cabin reaches cruising altitude and the seatbelt sign turns off. Pick up your belongings calmly. If you're unsure, ask the flight attendant first. They almost always say yes. Stay within your own cabin class. Don't take exit rows or premium seats without permission. The exact words: "Would you mind if I move to that empty row once we're settled?" That's the better seat in economy. But sometimes, a much better row, the kind that costs everyone else extra money, is sitting completely empty for a different reason entirely. Number 10. The extra legroom seat nobody bought. Those first row seats behind the dividers, bulkhead seats, and extra legroom rows usually sell for $50 to $90 more. When they don't sell, something very quiet happens at the gate that almost no senior ever takes advantage of. Airlines almost never advertise this part. When extra legroom seats are still empty during the final minutes before boarding, gate agents have full discretion to release them to passengers who ask politely, and older travelers are quietly at the top of that list. The airline makes nothing from an empty premium seat. They make a happy customer by handing it over. Most seniors never think to ask, so the seat stays empty, and someone in a tight regular row spends the flight in deep discomfort. Margaret, a retired hospital administrator from Cleveland, asked the gate agent during a stop in Detroit if any extra legroom seats were still available. The agent looked at her screen for about 3 seconds, smiled, and handed Margaret a new boarding pass with the bulkhead row written across the top. No charge, no questions. Margaret had been flying that same airline for years and never knew that conversation was even possible. Your defense. Check in at the gate desk roughly 30 to 45 minutes before boarding. Ask specifically about extra legroom seats. Don't demand a particular row. Mention quietly that any available row would be appreciated. The exact words. If any extra legroom seats are still open, I'd love one if it's possible. Quick pause here. If you've already missed 5 or 6 of these on past flights, you're not alone. Most older travelers miss 8 or 9 of the first 10 without ever realizing it, but the next 9 are even better. The next one alone is what flight attendants quietly wish more seniors would ask for, and almost no one ever does. And number 1 is still ahead, the one move that pays you back. Free, on every flight, for years afterward. If this is helping you, take 3 seconds and hit subscribe. It's the only way I can keep making these for you. Now, let's get into the parts of the flight most older travelers never even think about, starting with one that decides how the next 3 hours actually feel. Number 9. The hot tea that never reaches the cart. The drink cart offers coffee, soda, juice, and water. You scan the options, you don't see tea. You stay quiet, you drink water, and wonder if there was anything else. Here's the part the galley keeps to itself. Almost every flight over 2 hours stocks hot tea in the back. Black, green, herbal, sometimes chamomile or peppermint. None of it appears on the cart because hot liquids slow service down. They have to be poured carefully. They need lids. They take time the crew doesn't have during the rush of first service. So the tea sits in the galley, waiting for someone to ask. Almost nobody does. For older travelers especially, a quiet cup of warm tea late into a long flight changes everything. It calms the system. It helps with sleep. It feels human in a setting that often doesn't. And the crew is happy to bring it out. They just need the request. Your defense. Ask after the first service round, when the crew has more time. Specify the type if you have a preference. Ask for honey or lemon on the side if you'd like it. The exact words. If you have any hot tea in the galley, I'd really appreciate a cup. That's a small comfort, but the next one is the one flight crews told me they wish every senior would ask for, because it actually keeps the passenger safe. Number 8. The medication help you don't have to explain. You take a pill mid-flight. You need water. You press the call button slowly, worried you're bothering someone. You feel like an inconvenience just for needing to manage your own health. Here's something most older travelers never realize. Flight attendants are specifically trained to help passengers manage medication during a flight. That includes bringing water at any moment, even when the seatbelt sign is on, offering a small snack to take pills with, and quietly flagging the lead crew member to check on the passenger periodically. None of it is a favor. It's part of the job. And most crew members genuinely prefer knowing which passengers are on important medication. It helps them do their work properly and gives them peace of mind too. Dorothy, a retired bookkeeper from Sacramento, used to feel embarrassed asking for water when she needed her blood pressure medication. On a flight to her daughter's wedding, she finally mentioned it quietly to the flight attendant during the first service round. For the rest of the flight, every time the crew member walked past her row, she gave a small nod just to check in. Dorothy said it was the calmest 5 hours she'd ever spent on a plane. Your defense. Mention your medication timing during the first service round, not later. Keep it brief. No need to explain the condition or the prescription. Ask for water proactively before you actually need it. The exact words. I'll be taking medication in about an hour. Could I trouble you for some water when you're back this way? That's the help you ask for directly. The next one is the comfort the crew can adjust without anyone else in the cabin even noticing, and it changes the entire feel of the flight. Number 7. The temperature adjustment almost no one knows about. The cabin feels cold. You shiver. You pull out a sweater. You suffer for the next 3 hours in silence, assuming this is just how flying is now. Here's the part flight attendants have told me they quietly wish more older passengers would ask for. The cabin temperature on most modern aircraft can be adjusted zone by zone, not just for the whole plane, but specifically for the section you're sitting in. The crew can usually warm a row by a few degrees within 5 to 10 minutes without affecting anyone else. They do it constantly for business class. They'll do it for any other section too if someone simply mentions it. Almost nobody does. Older passengers especially. They assume the temperature is fixed. They assume one row is the same as another. They assume asking might come across as picky. None of that is true. The crew is genuinely glad when someone mentions it. It's much easier to adjust the cabin than to deal with a tired, cold passenger 4 hours into a flight. Your defense. Wait until the cabin temperature has stabilized after takeoff, usually about 20 minutes into the flight. Catch the flight attendant during a quieter moment. Be specific, but kind. Ask once, not repeatedly. The exact words. Our row feels a little chilly. Would a small adjustment be possible? That handles your comfort. The next one is about food specifically. Food that's already been cooked, already paid for, and almost always thrown in the trash at the end of the flight. Number 6. The untouched meal in the forward galley. On any flight with meal service, the front cabin gets served first. Once first class and business class have eaten, there are almost always extra meals sitting in the forward galley, anywhere from 2 to 6 untouched trays that nobody claimed. Those meals are about to be thrown away. They were prepared for a specific passenger count, but cancellations, no-shows, and people who skip the meal mean there's always extra. Airlines don't advertise it because they sell upgraded meal packages, but the food is already cooked, already loaded, already part of the flight's catering cost. Letting an older passenger in the back enjoy one costs the airline absolutely nothing. The crew rarely offers these meals openly because they don't want a rush of requests from every row and coach. But a single quiet ask from a senior passenger near the end of a long flight, especially one who hasn't been demanding, is almost always answered with a small smile and a tray that wasn't supposed to come back. Some travelers have eaten full, first-class meals in economy seats this way without ever knowing it was a possibility. Your defense. Wait until the final 2 hours of a long flight. Approach the galley curtain quietly, not the aisle. Be gracious, the answer may be no, and that's fine. Never demand it. The exact words. If there's anything spare from the forward galley, I'd be grateful for whatever you can share. Food settles the body, but the next one settles the mind during the part of flying that scares most older passengers more than anything else. Number 5. The cockpit update for nervous flyers. Turbulence starts. The wings shake. The plane drops slightly. You grip the armrest. You have no idea how long this is going to last, and the not knowing is somehow worse than the bumps themselves. Here's something passengers almost never think to ask. Flight attendants have direct communication with the cockpit throughout the entire flight. If a senior passenger is anxious and asks softly what the pilots are expecting, the crew can quietly walk to the galley, call the flight deck on the interphone, and come back 90 seconds later with a real answer. Light chop for about 20 more minutes. We're climbing for smoother air. We'll be out of this within 15 minutes. That single piece of information transforms the flight for anyone who's anxious, knowing there's an end to the bumps and approximately when calms the body in a way that no breathing exercise can match. The crew is happy to do it. It takes them less than 2 minutes, and it turns a fearful passenger into a calm one for the rest of the trip. Your defense. Ask during a calm moment, not during the worst of the turbulence. Keep your voice conversational, not panicked. Be grateful for whatever the answer is. Even an honest, "we're not sure yet," is information. The exact words. I get a little nervous in turbulence. Could you check with the cockpit on how long this section might last? We're down to the last 4. And these are the ones that make every senior I've ever talked to say, I wish I'd known this years ago. Stay with me. Because number 4 is the small thing almost every older passenger walks right past at the end of every flight without realizing what they just left behind. Number 4. The quiet souvenir most passengers walk past. The flight is winding down. The crew is collecting trash. You stand up, gather your bag, and walk off the plane with nothing but a used boarding pass, and the cabin is about to be cleaned out behind you. Here's what most older travelers never realize. Many of the small items on board, unopened headsets, amenity kit pieces, decks of playing cards, airline-branded pens, Sometimes even a printed menu from the front cabin are about to be discarded or recycled the moment the cleaning crew arrives. Asking quietly during the final descent often means those small items go home with you instead of into a galley trash bag. This isn't a luxury upgrade. It's the kind of small keepsake older passengers used to be handed automatically a generation ago, and it's still on the plane. The crew is allowed to give them away. They just don't volunteer them anymore unless someone asks. Some senior travelers have small collections of amenity kits from international flights they took years ago. Every one of them came from a single quiet question. Your defense. Wait until the last 20 to 30 minutes of the flight, during the quiet part of the descent. Be specific about what you'd like. Small, clear requests work best. Take only what's offered, never more. The exact words. I'd love to keep something small as a memento from this trip. Anything you can spare? That's for the end of the flight. The next one is for the moment right after the one that turns most older travelers' stomachs into knots before they even land. Number 3, the radio call that holds your connection. You land with 25 minutes until your next flight boards. The plane is taxiing slowly. You watch the minutes disappear on your watch. You start to panic. You picture missing the flight, sleeping in a strange terminal, starting the whole journey over. Here's what almost no passenger thinks to ask. The flight crew on your current flight can radio ahead to the next gate when an older passenger is at risk of missing a connection. Sometimes the ground crew holds the door for a few more minutes. Sometimes they arrange for a courtesy cart to meet you at the arrival gate to drive you across the terminal. It isn't a guarantee, but it almost never happens unless the passenger speaks up during descent. This is one of the quietest acts of kindness in commercial aviation. It costs the airline almost nothing. It saves the senior passenger a missed connection, a night in a strange city, and the deep fatigue of starting the journey over. But it only happens when someone asks. Otherwise, the crew assumes everyone has time, and the plane lets you off at the back of the line like every other passenger. Your defense. Mention your connection time and flight number during the descent phase. Have the gate number ready if you know it. Ask calmly. Panic in your voice triggers caution from the crew, not urgency. The exact words. My connection is tight today. Is there any way to have someone meet me at the gate? That's the rush before the next flight. The next one is the exact opposite, slowing everything down on purpose, while everyone else fights for the door. Number 2, the calm exit most travelers never take. The plane lands. The seatbelt sign turns off. Everyone jumps up at once. The aisle becomes a wall of impatient passengers grabbing overhead bags, shoving forward, trying to be first off the plane. Older travelers get pushed, bumped, and rushed into the jet bridge before they've even gathered their belongings. You don't have to be in that wall. Most flight attendants are happy to let an older passenger remain seated until the rush clears completely, and on some airlines, the crew can briefly hold the gate so a senior traveler isn't hurried. You walk off calmly. You avoid the crush in the jet bridge. You step into the terminal without the rising heart rate and the elbow bumping that comes with being part of the herd. This is what experienced senior travelers have quietly been doing for years. They stay in their seats, watch the cabin empty, walk off last with the crew nodding at them, and meet their wheelchair or assistance person at the gate without rushing. The arrival becomes the calmest part of the trip instead of the most stressful. Your defense. Mention during descent that you'd prefer to deplane after the rush. Stay seated calmly as the cabin empties. A flight attendant will usually come check on you once the aisle has cleared. If someone is meeting you at the gate, mention that too. The exact words. I'd like to take my time getting off today. Is it all right if I wait until the cabin clears? That handles this one flight. But the final move on this list isn't about this flight at all. It's about every single flight you take for years after this one, and almost no senior knows it exists. Number 1. The note that pays you back for years. You've just had a wonderful flight. The crew was kind. They went out of their way for you. You want to say thank you in some way that actually matters, not just a smile on the way off the plane. Here's the part almost no senior traveler ever uses. Every major airline runs a customer commendation program. You can go to the airline's website after the trip, write a short note praising a specific flight attendant by name, and that note goes directly into the crew member's personnel file. It takes about 3 minutes. It costs nothing. And flight attendants remember the passengers who do this for years afterward. Here's the quiet part, the part that makes this number 1. The next time you fly that same airline, there's a real chance one of those crew members is on your flight. They remember names. They remember faces. And when they recognize the passenger who took the time to write in, the entire service quietly shifts. Small favors, all flight long, extra attention. The little upgrades that don't appear on any list because they only happen to passengers the crew has chosen to look after. That's why this is number one. Every other perk on this list is for one flight. This one pays you back on every flight you take after it, for years to come. It's the only one on this list that compounds. Your defense. Note the flight attendant's name during the trip. It's on their badge. Note the flight number and date. After landing, visit the airline's website and find the compliments or customer commendation section. Keep your notes specific, and warm 3 or 4 sentences is enough. The exact words. I'd love to know your name. I'm planning to write a note about you to the airline. Now, I'm curious. Which one of these surprised you the most? Tell me in the comments. I'd love to know. And if you want your next trip to feel smoother, calmer, and more in control, make sure you subscribe. Because stress at the airport doesn't come from travel. It comes from not knowing what's really happening.